everyone, and welcome to this SheClicks webinar about file management in Lightroom. Tonight's webinar is sponsored by Datacolor, a global leader in color management for 50 years. Datacolor is committed to helping photographers achieve their vision from capture to edit to print. Discover more at datacolor.com. So thank you very much to Datacolor for sponsoring this webinar. Tonight's webinar is presented by Judy Hancock Holland, who is joining us from Vancouver Island. Hi Judy, how are you?
Hi, I'm very well. It's a little smoky here on the west coast of Canada because of the American fires, but we're making do.
Oh, good, good. So so I guess it's not the clearest of conditions for taking photographs.
No, indoor photography is the order of the day.
Yeah, and a decent mask if you go outside, I expect.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much for offering to present this webinar. I know we had quite a lot of discussion about how we were going to cover it, and I know there's a lot to squeeze in. So if you'd like to crack on straight away, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
I'll do that. I'll start by sharing my screen. So Lightroom is a really powerful and extremely useful program for organizing and processing your images both, but a lot of folks end up with some major headaches because they don't understand the fundamentals of how Lightroom works and how to manage their files. So that's what we're going to address today. Maybe you've even been afraid to try it because it's a bit intimidating and overwhelming to learn. But by the time we finish this session today, you're going to have the background to get started. And if you've already been using Lightroom and you've ended up with a mess on your hands, you're going to know what to do to straighten that out. So I don't know everything about Lightroom. I don't believe there's anybody on the planet who does, but I know enough to save you some troubles, and that's my goal today. So your photos, we're going to start with some basics so that you understand the concept of how Lightroom works. And the first principle that you need to understand is your photos are not stored in your Lightroom catalog. Your catalog and your photos are two separate things. So if you think back to a library with a card catalog, and I'm showing my age here because this is how I think of card catalogs, but today we have different kinds of card catalogs. In any case, you know that the book and the entry in the card catalog are not the same thing, right? So the card catalog in the library contains a card or a digital card that refers to the book and tells you where it is and something about it. It's a database, and so is Lightroom. Lightroom does the same thing. It's like a modern card catalog that keeps track of where your photographs are. They're like the books on the shelf, and what you've done to them, so it gives you a descriptor of what they're like. So think of your photos like books you put on a shelf in some kind of logical order. You want to have a system of putting those books on the shelf or those photos in your hard drive that makes some sense to you. If you happen to delete the library, your Lightroom library or catalog, you will lose your file management system, but you do not lose the photographs. Similarly, if you delete your photographs, you don't lose your catalog. You won't find those photos in your catalog, and actually I'll show you in a minute that it might look like they're there, but they actually are not. So let's look at how you get those photos into your library, how you get your card catalog to recognize the book on the shelf. So you need to have a plan for a file structure. I find that I believe I'm on a Mac, and there's a pictures folder that comes right as part of the integral organization of the Mac. I believe there's a similar thing on a Windows machine. So I make a folder for each year inside that pictures folder. So I have a 2020 folder, and then inside that folder, I put a folder for each shoot I do. And I title that folder by year, month, date. So 2020, 09, 11 would be my general beginning name of the folder, and then I'll put the event. So it might be a corn maze, it might be a calla lily, it might be a wedding, it might be a birthday, whatever. Putting it in year, month, date helps Lightroom keep them organized in chronological order, so it's just easier to find what you're looking for. You drag your files into the appropriate folder without using Lightroom. Now, there's more than one way to do this. I do it this way because I found that when I was doing it the other way, letting Lightroom import without my import like directly from my camera card, my files ended up in weird places and I could never find them. So my suggested way of doing it, which is how I always do it myself now, is without having Lightroom even running. I get my card for my camera, I put it in the computer, I transfer those files into a folder where I want them to live forever in that file structure that I've mentioned in point 1. And then I eject the card, because if I don't eject the card, Lightroom's going to want to deal with the card and import things from there, but I've already done that. So I eject the card, and then I go and open Lightroom. And I import them using add, not copy. There's some choices at the top of the screen after you hit the import button. And we're going to look at all this right in Lightroom, but just to give you an overview, there is a bar at the top of the screen in Lightroom after you click the import button, and it'll give you the option to move or add or copy. And you don't want to do move or copy, you want to add. And when you say add, what you're telling Lightroom to do is add a reference to the photos I already put where I wanted them, add a reference to that in your catalog so that you'll know where they are. And then once they're imported, you don't want to move them or rename them anywhere other than in Lightroom, because if you do, Lightroom will lose track of what you've done. And this will become clearer as I show you some actual Lightroom screenshots and we work with it. By using this method of importing, I never end up with duplicates and I always know where my files are. I keep them, you can keep them on an internal drive in your computer or an external. I use an external drive for my photographs because it's way bigger. I have a 4 terabyte drive just for photographs. And also the benefit of that is in case of a fire, I can grab that external drive really easily and get out of my house. So here is, this is not the full screen, but part of the screen. And you can see that if you click import, this comes up. You get this thing at the top. And this is the part I want you to pay attention to. You can copy as a DNG, copy the file, move the file, or add the file. And if you're using my method, then I would always make sure it says add. Now you would think that Adobe would arrange this so that once you pick add, every other time you go to import, it would also be set on add, but that is not the case. I've had it move over to copy many, many times. So I always check that before I click the button to go ahead and import. And I'll show you that in a minute. Now, Lightroom is a non-destructive editor, and this is one of its big advantages over Photoshop. Photoshop is a destructive editor. Whatever you do to your photo gets embedded right in the photo. But when you work with Lightroom to work on your photographs, it keeps your raw file untouched, and then it makes another file with all the things you've done in it. So if you were to open, as I did, I've got a file here called 2020-0225, Hans, Mark, and Doug. I do lots of hand portraits. So I have, this is my raw file. I shoot an Olympus EM1 Mark II. So this is the raw file, Olympus raw file. And then Lightroom creates a file called an XMP file. It has the same name as my raw file, but the different extension. So this is my raw file, and this is a list of instructions that Lightroom writes down for me when I say, you know, bring the exposure up or down, change the contrast, do some sharpening, whatever it does. And these XMP files, you never have to do anything with them, but you don't want to throw them out, because if you do, you lose your edits. Your edits are in the XMP file, and your untouched raw file is always there for you. This is a little bit of what one of those XMP files looks like if you open it up in a text editor. And you can see it's very cryptic computer language, but when you look closely, you can see, okay, the sharpness is set at 50, color temperature is set at 5250, the white balance is at shot, and there's all this little cryptic stuff. So those are important files to keep. This is the hard drive that I use for my photographs. It's only maybe 4 inches across at most, and it's a very rugged drive. If you drop it, you're not necessarily going to break it. And it's very quick to grab if I need to go somewhere. I also use an iMac 27-inch for my main photo processing computer, and I have a laptop that I use for travel, used to use for doing presentations, and it's easy enough for me to grab this little drive and plug it into the other computer. I have tried having my Lightroom catalog on this as well, but it's slow because it is a hard drive, not an SSD drive. And I have an SSD drive in my computer. So I keep the catalog on my computer and the drive, the photos on the drive. I can move that catalog if I'm going on a trip and take it with me onto my laptop as well. So here's a screenshot of one of my folders showing you this is the pictures folder. And it's within the Photos 4 terabyte drive that I have. And I've got a 2020 folder there. And I put asterisks in front of it because, at least on the Mac, if you do that, it forces the asterisks to the top of any alphabetical or numerical file. So it's just easier to keep my most recent pictures at the top by putting some asterisks in front of the file name. And then you can see all these different shoots. I've got, I did some shots of a horn. I've had a trip to Arizona back in January, so I've got that. I did some tulips in the spring and so forth. And for things like flowers, I tend to put them in this file structure for the year I shoot them. But by the end of the year, I take those and I transfer them down into, I have a flowers folder here. And within that folder, there's tulips and lilies and all kinds of different flowers. So I file them there. After 2020 is over, I will go and move all those, because at that point, it'll make more sense to me when I'm looking for that picture of that orange tulip. I'll be more likely to know that it's in flowers than I would to know what year I shot it. So when I'm doing the year, I keep them there and then I organize them. So I have animals and birds, awards, flowers, and various things that at the end of every year, that's one of my housekeeping tasks. I also back up this hard drive to 2 other drives. You can see an 8 terabyte Time Machine drive and a 4 terabyte Time Machine drive here. These are Apple specific program called Time Machine, which does backups 24/7 all the time without me having to think about it, as long as those drives are plugged in. So I'm having my photos and my hard drive on my Mac, so where my catalog is. So my catalog and my photos are constantly being backed up to these 2 external drives. Even if one of those external drives fails, I still have the other one. And in addition to that, I use a service called CrashPlan to back up my photos and documents to the cloud. CrashPlan and Backblaze are generally considered to be the 2 that are best for photographers, and I've been very happy with CrashPlan. So if you have a catalog mess, and I would imagine at least some of you do, I've made a lot of money as a consultant helping people straighten out their catalog messes. First of all, you want to find all your active catalogs, and then you want to merge them together and delete the catalogs you no longer need. And we can talk about this a little bit later on, perhaps even in the question period, if some of you are facing this. After you merge them together, before you delete the catalogs you don't need anymore, I wouldn't delete them right away. I would put them in a folder called something like Delete March 1st, 2021. And then if you know you've used your computer, you've worked with your catalogs all the way along, you know everything's there, nothing's missing, then you can throw them in the trash later on. They do take a lot of space, so you don't want to keep too many catalogs around. A word about backing up. When you back up, you are backing up your catalog, not your photos. So when Lightroom says, do you want to back up your catalog, and you say yes, it's backing up the catalog, but not the photos. You have to back up the photos separately. And if you backed up your photos, you haven't necessarily backed up your catalog. So you just need to remember that those are 2 different things, and you want them both backed up. Ideally, you want at least 3 copies of your images and catalog in 3 different places. And for really, really important photographs, for example, 13 years ago, I lost my husband to cancer, and I took all the pictures I had of him, and I did this standard backup where I've got them on in the cloud on Backblaze or CrashPlan. I've got them on my external hard drive backups and on my computer, but I also burned a couple of DVDs, and gave them to people, family members, to keep in their homes, so that if my house burns down and I'm not here, those pictures, which are so precious to me, are backed up off-site and in the cloud. So I'm being extra careful, but our most important photos are really, really important. So it pays to do that, I think. We can look at this in when we get into Lightroom. There is, under catalog settings, there's a place where you can tell Lightroom where you want your backups to be located. So in my case, they are in my 4 terabyte hard drive in a folder called Primary Lightroom Catalog. And then all those backups will be there that you have Lightroom do for you. And notice here that the size of my catalog, I have about 54,000 photographs in my catalog. And my camera is not a terribly high megapixel camera. It's about 20.4 megapixels or something. So my catalog is 16.84 gigabytes just for the catalog. There's no pictures in there, folks. There's no images in there. That's just the database to keep track of them all. So that takes a lot of space. So I only keep 3 or 4 of those around. And I have mine set, and suggest that you have yours set, to back up every time you exit Lightroom. You have the option when you do that to choose not to exit, because this will, or not to back up, because when you go to quit Lightroom, this will pop up and it'll say, do you want to skip this time or back up? Typically, if I'm going to quit Lightroom during the day and I know I'm going to go back to it during the day, I skip that time. But I do my backups at night just before I go to bed, because they can take a while. I do have it set to test the integrity and optimize the catalog, which keeps it in good repair and working well, and that takes time. So I tend to back up before I go to bed at night. This is important. You're going to want to write this down. I'll leave it on for a minute, and I will reiterate it when I get to the end of my presentation. There are an awful lot of resources out there, but these are my go-to resources. If you want to do some really thorough, deep learning of Lightroom or Photoshop, the best teacher I've found anywhere is Ben Wilmar, and he has several courses on creativelive.com, which are well worth looking at, and they go on sale from time to time. And when you're looking at Creative Live, make sure you look at the 2020 courses. He's got a complete guide to Photoshop, and he's got a complete guide to Photoshop 2020. And I think the same is true for Lightroom. He's an excellent teacher. He also has his own mastersacademy.com, where it's a subscription service, and you pay a certain cost per month and you can look at all the videos you want. Outstanding teacher, can't recommend him highly enough. If you just have a quick question you want answered, there's a free resource called lightroomqueen.com, and she really keeps up to date with Lightroom. And if I forget how to do something or run into something I haven't run into before, that's where I go. So those are well worth exploring as resources. For next steps in learning, I have a YouTube channel. If you just look up my name, Judy Hancock Holland, I have 2 2-hour tutorials on Lightroom. Unfortunately, I did a 4 tutorial series and forgot to tape the first 2. So I don't have those first 2 there, but basically they are what I'm covering for you today. So if you have today, this would be a natural place for you to go next. And those tutorials look at sort of theory for the first hour, and then for the second hour, I have a number of people who've sent in photos, and I work at processing those photos in Lightroom. So that's another good resource to go to next. So that's the end of my slides there. I'm going to go into Lightroom, and we can get started at the nitty-gritty. I opened my Lightroom catalog with this picture of a pie because I wanted to show you something. You may notice that there is a little box right here on this with an exclamation mark in it. The reason that is there is because yesterday when my husband baked a pie, I took a photograph of it and put it on Facebook, and then I threw the picture away. But when I took the photo, it came out in portrait orientation. So I brought it into Lightroom and rotated it so it would look right on Facebook. And then I threw it away from the Finder. I didn't throw it away from in Lightroom. So Lightroom still thinks there's this picture there, and it's not, but it can't find it because I deleted it outside of Lightroom. So it thinks it should have it, and it has this exclamation point. If I click that exclamation point, it says the image couldn't be used because the original file can't be found. Would you like to locate it? Well, I'm not going to try to locate it. It knows where it used to be. It was on my desktop. I'm not going to try to locate it because I know that I threw it in the trash. It was just a quick snapshot for Facebook and get rid of it afterwards. But if you did have a file that showed up with an exclamation mark like that, you could click locate and it would bring you to your file system and you could go and try to find that file. And if you were successful in finding it, then you could select it and Lightroom would say, oh, what a relief, now I know where it is. But this is all just to underscore the point that once you've imported your photos, you don't want to move them from anywhere else. So let's do an import so you can see how I do that. And as I said before, this isn't the only way to import, but I find it's the most foolproof way, and it ends up with my photos are where I put them. So I had a file of photos that I got ready for this webinar, and I'm going to import that now. I know that I put them on my Photos 4 terabyte drive, so I'm going in there. I know I put them in the pictures folder there. I know I put them in 2020. And if we scroll down here, there is a folder called 2020-09-17 SheClicks demo. And I've made a point, discard later. So I click that, it shows me my photos. And now I'm going up here and checking that I don't have copy as DNG, copy or move. I've got add selected. So what I'm telling Lightroom is I don't want you to move my files. I want you to leave them where they are and just add them to your catalog. So in a library analogy, it's like the book is on the shelf, just make a card or make a digital reference for that so that you'll know where it is and we can work with it. So I make sure it says add. I go over here to develop settings. I don't want to add any develop settings. Metadata. Now we could bring these in. I have a preset already made, but if you had none showing there and you wanted to tag these with metadata, which is a really good idea, we could do that by going down to here and saying a new preset, and it will bring up all the metadata. And I'm going to call this one Bozo the Clown. That'll help me remember to get rid of it later. And basic information, name, rating, label, camera information, and so on. What I'm going to do is simply go down here to the copyright. And I'm going to type copyright, which is Option G on a Mac. You could try Alt G on a PC, and I'm going to put Bozo the Clown. And the copyright status, I'm going to put as copyrighted. And then I can put in rights usage and so forth. I can put the creator in here, which I do. And I could fill all this out, website, job title, all that stuff. Lots of information we could put in here. I generally just put my copyright information in, and I'll show you mine in a minute. But then you would click create, and it will make a new metadata preset that I can apply automatically every time I import. Now, I don't really want to import these as Bozo the Clown, but if we go to my copyright Judy Hancock Holland, we can even go to edit the preset, and here you can see what I've done. I've got my copyright notice that it's copyrighted. I've got my name and where I am, Canada. I've got my website. I haven't included an awful lot else because for the most part, this is a preset that I apply to every single image I bring in, whether it's video or still photography, and mostly it's still photography. So as long as you've got these covered, then if somebody steals your image, you're going to be able to go into the metadata of that image and see that, hey, wait a minute, that image belongs to me and is copyrighted to me. So here we have our import screen, and I've got my metadata set. I don't want any developed settings. I don't want to apply any keywords. You can, but these are all different kinds of photos. So if they were all tulips, I might put tulips in there as a keyword. And then I click import. And we watch, and it brings those in. And now there's two ways I can look at them. I can go to previous import. That's all the new ones we just imported. Or I go down here and there it is. She clicks demo. And there are the pictures that we brought in. So let's see where we've got to here. If I decide that I want to move an image to a different folder, I can do that very easily. So this is my husband, Terry, and I happen to have a folder here called Terry. So if I want to take that picture and put it in that folder so it stays better organized, I can drag him in there, drop him, and there he is. Now when we go in, got all these pictures of him, and there he is. I can keyword these images. So when we go over here, we're in the library module, we go over here, we can see the metadata for each photograph. And this is handy because it'll tell me what ISO I was at, what focal length, what lens I was using, all that sort of thing is all there. This was an old shot when I was still shooting on Nikon. If we go here, you'll see we've got the Olympus EM10. Here, you'll see Olympus EM1 Mark II, 60mm lens, ISO 800 for this shot of Comet Neowise. And I can add a title, I can add a caption, it tells me the size of the file type, and so on and so on and so on. I brought these in as JPEGs. I shoot RAW always, but I brought these in as JPEGs because they would work faster for demonstration purposes. So I will often use keywords, and then I can search for keywords. So the quick and dirty way to do that is go up here to text. Any searchable field contains, let's say, cello. I'm a big cello fan, and I like to shoot cellos, and here we go. I've got anything that I keyworded with the word cello is there. If we put in the word calla, you're going to get thousands because I shoot a lot of calla lilies. And isn't that interesting? That's a tulip, and I've keyworded it with calla. So let's fix that. Here we've got calla, high key, lily. Well, that's not right. It is high key, but it's a tulip. So we just take that out of there and take the word calla out and hit return. And now it disappears from that search for calla. But that's how you would change keywords. If you have a photograph that doesn't have any keywords, I don't know if we have one here or not. There's one. You just add your keywords by typing them in here. So this is an abstract, and I might keyword it with flower because, believe it or not, this was shot from a flower originally and just manipulated from there. So you can see that adding keywords is really easy. And I try to do that whenever I import from a shoot. And of course, you can apply more than keywords to more than one photo at a time. If I'm really honest, though, I don't always do that when I first import from a shoot. I'm usually too excited to see what I have. So I will go back every couple of weeks. I'll go back through all the shots I've done in the last 2 weeks, and I'll keyword those. But keywording is really helpful in terms of helping you find things. And I also use keywords like on this one, I've got high key. So I will use a keyword related to what type of photo it is. I might use landscape, I might use high key, low key, monochrome. There's one I should have on here because I do use monochrome as one of my keywords. And then if I find myself needing a high key monochrome photo of a tulip, it's super easy to find it by doing what I did before. I just go up to that, go to all my photographs, and you can even just put it in by text, but you could also go to keywords under attributes. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves, I think. So I want to talk about the difference between folders and collections. So if you look over here on the right part of my screen, you'll see these things are drives. So this is my IMAX internal drive, and I keep very little on there. This is my 4 terabyte photo drive, which I keep most of my photographs on. And then within that, this is a folder called Pictures, and the folder of 2020, and the folder for SheClicks. That's where the photographs live. I don't want to move them from there. But maybe I want to have a bunch of photos from a bunch of different shoots put together so that I can present them in a slideshow or a presentation. So that's where collections come in. Folders are where they live. Collections are like, if you use iTunes and you have playlists, you know that when you move a song into a playlist, it doesn't actually move the song. It just tells the playlist to use that song. So for example, here I've got a playlist or a collection that I've put together of floral abstracts, a bunch of pictures that I've created as abstracts, starting with flowers. I will go down to, I have a collection, it's empty at the moment, but I have a fellow I like to use to make my big canvas prints. And I have a collection of photos that for Alan to print that I'm waiting for. I will have, I'll do an annual best. I'll do a collection of photos for blog articles. I keep track of what I post on Facebook. So for example, I have my Facebook folder, and there I have my SheClicks, and this tells me what I've put on SheClicks, which helps me not bore you to death by posting the same photo twice. And so when I post it to SheClicks, first I drag it in here, and then I export it into Facebook to share with you folks. I also have, I'm working on a collection of condolence cards. So I have a collection of photographs that I might use on the condolence cards. I have presentations, various presentations I've done. So here's pictures that I might use in a presentation on digital art, another one on high key, and another one on minimalism. My YouTube channel has a video on minimalist photography, and these were some of the images that I used in that. I also do a presentation on photography as a spiritual practice, and these are some of the photos for that. If I'm thinking about submitting to a competition, I'll have a collection of those, and so on and so on. I keep a collection of textures and collection of images for my website. So collections are, they point to the photographs. We haven't actually moved the photographs out of the folders where they live. We've just told the collection, I want this one and this one and this one and this one. Please put them all together in a collection for me. And that's tends to be very, very useful. Suppose you want to move a folder to an external drive. Maybe the drive that you're using, maybe you've been using a drive on your laptop and it's getting kind of full, and you want to move those pictures to another one, to another drive, an external drive. In this case, my external drive doesn't have a lot of photos on it, but let's say I wanted to move my magnolias to that external drive. All I have to do is grab that folder, which is the magnolia, and drag it up here and drop it in the pictures folder. Oh, that's interesting. That one can't be copied. Don't know why. Let's do a different one. Let's take this one and drag it into the pictures here. And you can see those pictures disappeared from there, and now they're on the external drive. It was very quick. I chose a small folder. If you choose a big folder, it's got a lot of pictures in it, like 155, then it will take longer to do that. And then if I say, oh my goodness, I really wish I hadn't done that, I want to change my mind, then I drag it from here to here, and it goes back where it was. If you were to do this from outside of Lightroom, in your Finder or your Windows File Explorer, then you would have problems, because Lightroom, it's like you're doing it behind Lightroom's back. Lightroom doesn't know what you're doing, and so next time you try to find that picture in Lightroom, it says, but I don't know where it is. You must have moved it, and you didn't tell me. So we import them originally and get them in their folders from outside of Lightroom, and then we only move them or rename them within Lightroom. So if you want to rename a photo, say this one, I can, maybe I have to do it in this view, hold down Control or right click, and I get the option to do lots of different things. Huh, but I'm not seeing rename. Oh, okay, that applies to, sorry, that applies to folders, not pictures. If I wanted to rename the picture, I would go into the metadata over here, and I could just change that. I could change that title right there, but I'm doing it within Lightroom. If I did it outside of Lightroom, it wouldn't know where it was. I can change the name of this folder by right clicking, or on my Mac, I do Control click and hit rename, and it's called this now, and I could say discard tomorrow. Save it, and then it's saved here. I think one of the things that some of my clients, when I work with them, don't do enough of is to cull their photos when they import them. And I'm really actually pretty good about that. So I'm not going to be able to show you a lot to cull, but let's go to this Arizona shot. And this was my mother-in-law's hands that I was shooting on a trip to Arizona. So let's say I've got a lot of pictures here, and I've actually settled on these ones being the best ones. So I could get rid of some of these. So if I want to cull quickly, I can either cull by the thumbnails, or if you want to have a closer look, you can double click the image and have it come up. And all I have to do is press the X key. Watch what happens in this little thumbnail when I hit X. See this little flag comes up? I'm gonna undo that so you can see again. There'll be a message that comes up, set as rejected, and it's got a black flag with an X. If I want to do another one, I can do it that way, or I can shift click the whole bunch of these and hit X. Set all of those as rejected. Now they're not gone, they're still there. If I want to get rid of them all at once, I can hold down Command and hit delete. And what'll happen is I get a dialog box that says delete the 5 rejected master photos from the disk, or just remove them from Lightroom. This is an important distinction. If I delete them from the disk, then they're gone. They actually go to my trash can, and I could retrieve them on the Mac. And I think the same thing happens on Windows. It would go to your recycle bin, and then you could get them back. But I always think, okay, if I'm going to delete them from disk, they're gone, they're done. If I remove instead, they're still on my hard drive, but they're no longer in the card catalog. So it's like in a library, if you went to that old-fashioned old card catalog cabinet and you took the card for that book out and you tore it up. The book's still on the shelf. It didn't create any more space in your library for other books. So it all depends on what you want to do. I almost never remove a picture from Lightroom, because if it's a picture I want to keep, I want it in Lightroom so that I can keep track of it. So I'm going to say cancel, because I don't really want to do that. If I accidentally mark these as rejected, I can select them again and press U for unpick, and that removes that flag, and now they're there as normal. But let's just take this one and say, nah, don't need that one. So I'm just going to hit the delete key, and again, I get a similar kind of message Delete moves the file to the Finder's trash and removes it from Lightroom. This will also remove the synced files, if any, from other Lightroom clients. Do I want to remove it from disk or just remove it from Lightroom? Well, in this case, I really do want to delete it from disk. And I do this a lot because I don't want 17 duplicates of the same shot. I don't want things that are out of focus or have motion blur in them. So I will actually delete that photo. If I really needed it back, I could go down here to the corner to my trash can and it would be there. Nope, that's the pie I deleted. Nope. But it would be in the trash somewhere and I could find it and get it back. Once I empty the trash, then I can't get it back again. So that's how to go through and cull quickly. Just hit X as you go through these pictures, just going from one to the next. Quickly going through, just hit the X key on the ones you don't want. Okay. Let's have a look at backups in the Lightroom settings. I showed you that on a slide, but let's show you where it actually lives. If on the Mac, you go to Lightroom Classic, it might be under File on the Windows machine, I'm not sure, but what you're looking for is Catalog Settings. So we click that and we get our general file, our general catalog settings, file handling, and metadata. This is where you can tell it where you want to have your catalog live. And this is the name of your primary, of the catalog you're using, when it was created, the last backup, and the size. And this is where you set, you can have Lightroom exit once a day, never, which is a bad idea, once a month. If you're an avid photographer, that's not nearly often enough. I find I like to have it here so that every time I import photos and then I quit, then I'm going to have it backed up. And as I showed you before, you can always say, no, don't back up right now. I'll do it the next time. If you have used Lightroom for very long, you may very well have some considerable number of libraries. So I'm going to set Lightroom aside here for a minute. We're going to go into my computer and we're going to search for files that end in .lrcat. That stands for Lightroom Catalog. And we want files where the name matches LRCat. So if I do that, it might take a minute. But eventually, it's going to show us all the Lightroom catalogs that I have. And it might be searching the wrong place. I'm going to try this one. Okay, here we go. On my iMac, it is showing me all these different Lightroom catalogs. Well, why would that be? Well, the ones that end in zip are my backups. So if I click this and go down here, this tells me that it's on my hard drive under Pictures, under Primary, Lightroom Catalog, under Backups, under 2020-0909. There it is. That's a backup. And the zip tells me that it's compressed to save space. And you can see I've got 4 of these. And then here's an alias. I'm not going to worry too much about that. And here's a locked one. This locked one is a temporary file that Lightroom needs. So we're not going to throw that away. They need that. But every time you do a major upgrade to Lightroom, it creates a new catalog. And that can be confusing. You can end up with a whole bunch of different catalogs like Lightroom Catalog 2-1, Lightroom Catalog -1, Primary Lightroom Catalog, and you don't know which one you want to be using. Well, that's when you look over here to see the date last opened. This is how I know this is the current one. And you don't normally have to worry about this, but if you do an upgrade to Lightroom, then it can be beneficial to go and check and see if you've got a bunch of these .lrcats laying around from years ago. And I've helped a friend with her Lightroom catalog. She had many of these on her computer, and they were really taking up space, and sometimes she'd go into the wrong one. You really don't need more than one Lightroom catalog. Most of us don't, because 50,000 photos counts as a small Lightroom catalog. I have about 54,000 in mine. 4 million photographs would be considered a big one. It used to be years ago that Lightroom couldn't handle as many photographs as it can now, but now you can easily have 4 million photographs in one Lightroom catalog, and there's such powerful organizational tools in it that you can use those tools to keep track of them, and there's no need to have more than one. So we're just about finished here. I think at this point, I'm going to put Lightroom back on the screen again, and perhaps it's time to answer some questions, Angela.
Yeah, sure. I thought your explanation, by the way, of how Lightroom works at its basis with the card catalogue was really, really good. It makes it very clear to people. So that's great. Thank you. Right. So the first question is actually two questions combined, quite lengthy, and you've kind of gone through it, but maybe just to underline it. Jay Gavin has said that she has a lot of photographs in the library and she doesn't know how to organize them. So how could she start again? Should she start right from, right back from the beginning?
Actually, it's pretty easy if I understand your question correctly. Let's say that you had one folder here called 2020 and all your photos were in there, and it was just like everything is mixed up, birthday parties with weddings, with flowers, with dogs, and oh my goodness, it's easy. All you have to do is right click on the main folder and say create a folder inside that folder. So let's say you wanted to put another folder inside 2020 so you could get those dog pictures out of your flowers. You just right click that, create a folder inside, and you'll get a dialog like this, and you'll call this one dogs. And so now you'll see there's the dogs folder. And you would just then go in and take all the pictures of dogs, and I don't think I have any, but let's grab a magnolia and call it a dog, and drag that in, and it would go in there. Oh, that's the one that doesn't like to move. Sorry. Not looking good, is it? We need to cancel out of this already. But you get my drift.
Yeah.
And you would just make a bunch more folders. So if all you had was the 2020, you could make all these folders.
Yeah.
And then do it within Lightroom and move them within Lightroom, and then Lightroom won't lose track. If you were to go into your computer, like in a Mac on a Finder, and organize them there, then Lightroom would have no idea, and you would be really messed up. It would take hours and hours and hours to fix it. But remember, you can drag more than one photo at a time. So you could just select all the flower pictures and make a new folder called flowers and drag all the flowers in there.
Great. That does seem quite straightforward. And it seems to me that Lightroom is a lot more intuitive to use now, because it's a while since I used it. And say if you were moving files before, you had to sort of click and select move to, whereas now you can just drag them between folders in the structure within Lightroom. So that's really useful.
Become much easier.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So Marilyn, some of these questions were early on and you have answered them, but I think it's worth just reiterating. So do you move your files at the end of the year in Photos folder or in Lightroom? So clearly it's in Lightroom, but you might do it within, yeah. Okay. And
you'll notice here on mine, I have my 2020 folder and my 2019 folder, but after that, I made a folder called prior to 2019, and I put all those other years in that because I'm old. I got pictures back to 1954.
You say you had a digital camera very early on.
I've done a lot of scanning. So that's how I do that. I keep anything prior to 2019 in its own folder. And when we come to the end of the year, then that'll switch. I'll put the 2019 in here. I'll change the name to prior to 2020, and I'll add a folder for 2021, and I'll put all my pictures in there. But I will create, I'll create that folder here.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Liz is asking, is the catalog size dependent on the image size or just the number of images?
The number of images
Okay.
and what you've done to them, you know, if you've processed them and stuff.
Right, yes, because it's storing all that information about them as well. Kathy says she moved all her photos onto an external drive and then deleted them from her computer. Now, of course, Lightroom can't find them, but there are lots. Is there anything she can do short of finding them all for Lightroom one by one? So basically, can she find more than one at a time?
Yeah, what I would do, there's a case where I would remove them. You could take, let's say her 2019 was the one that she moved and Lightroom can't find them. You could hit delete. No, I guess it doesn't work that way. You can hold down control and say remove. And then that will remove that whole folder from the Lightroom catalog. It's not deleting your pictures. It's just removing the references. Then do the import from where you have them now. Does that make sense, Kathy?
She'll have to type that in lower down, so it'll take a little while. But okay. Does it not still, if you say relocate one image, doesn't Lightroom oh, Kathy's saying yes, it does. Thank you. Does it not automatically sort of make a connection between the others?
No, you'd need to select them all and move them.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anila is saying, going back to import, if you have a shot in RAW, usually you copy to DNG. Does it typically still add, or does it just make a copy?
Ah, that makes a copy. And I never do that. I used to, but the benefits of DNG, I think the downsides of DNG outweigh the benefits of DNG. And I remember when I first got into photography, people said, oh, you should always make your raw files into DNGs because Adobe will be around forever and then your photos will be safe. Well, when you do that, you lose some of the raw data. So I shoot Olympus, and my Olympus raw file contains information that will not translate over to a DNG. And the same is likely true for Nikon and Canon and all the other makes as well. So I keep them as my proprietary raw format from my manufacturer. The other thing is I don't want to end up with duplicates. I don't want to have my manufacturer's raw file and the DNG. And it also takes the control away from me as to where I want to put them. So my suggestion is, without using Lightroom, put your files from your camera card into the folder you want them to live in, and then just add that and skip the DNG altogether. If your camera manufacturer was to go out of business, say Nikon goes out of business and that file format is no longer being created, those files would be supported for a long, 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 long time. And you would have plenty of warning to go in and convert your files to DNG at that time, which might make sense at that point in time. But it's a time-consuming process. It makes that whole process of importing your work much longer. So my advice is stick with your NEF or your CR2 or your ORF or whatever it is that you get straight out of your camera, because inevitably converting to DNG, you will lose some information too.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Amanda has asked, how do you know which of your photos don't have keywords? It seemed like you were able to tell when you were looking at the grid view.
There is a way to do that. Let me show you here. If we go, see if I never do this, but bear with me. I think you'll find that if we go to keyword, there is a way.
You've got a folder selected at the moment, which is showing having no images. So I don't know if that's a.
Let's go to all photographs, metadata, keyword. No, that's none. There is a way. I'm gonna show you. The other thing I didn't mention, I talked to you about collections, but I didn't mention smart collections, and that's one way to find those. So let's look at that. If I go to my collections and I click the plus sign, I say I want to create a new smart collection. And I want it to match all of these rules. I want the keywords are empty.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
Here we go. Bingo, all my pictures with no keywords. Isn't that fantastic?
That was quick. That was good. Yes, very useful.
And there's 22,000 of them, I'm ashamed to say.
But the nice thing is that you can chip away and add keywords, and then you can go back at another time and see how, you know, and you've reduced it to 21,500 images.
Exactly. And as I do, let's just show you as an example. If I take this one, it's a picture of a humpback whale, and I go here and go to keywords over here, and I put in the keyword whale, and hit return, see it's gone?
Yeah.
Because it no longer fits the criteria of having no keywords.
As you've got some other whales there, could you just show people how you would select, say, those 4 images and add the keywords to all of them?
Well, these 3 are together, so I can click that one, hold down shift and click that one, and then I can let go of the shift key and hold down the command key, which I think is control on a PC, and click that one. Now I have all 4 of these selected, and I can enter the word whale, and when I hit return, they will all disappear because now they have keywords.
Yeah, great. So that's a bit of keywording done for you.
Yes, and only 22,000 to go.
Marjorie has asked, do you need to keyword every single image, or can you pick a group? Well, we've just answered that one, haven't we? You can pick a group.
I don't. If it's important and it's something I think I might need in the future, then yes. So I sell quite a few of my flowers photographs, and so I need to get those keyworded. If somebody says, do you have a red camellia? Then I want to make sure, and let's see if I've actually got the right, I don't have red in here. So I want to add red. So that next time I search for that with the words camellia and red, it comes up. But the ones that aren't important, like the picture of the pie and stuff like that, I wouldn't bother.
Okay.
If I can add there, one thing I do try to keyword always, and you can see I haven't been good about it. These are copies of something else. I like to keyword people who are important to me, because I end up doing slideshows for celebrations of life. And when somebody calls me and says, so-and-so just died, we're having a celebration of life in a week, can you do a slideshow? It's a whole lot easier if I can just enter their name in the keyword search box and end up with all my pictures of that person.
Yep. Okay. An anonymous person has said, I import to Lightroom and put the files on an external hard drive and tick the box in Lightroom to make a second copy to another hard drive with the same file structure. If the first drive failed, how would you tell Lightroom to find the photos on the backup drive? Do you export all your photos and back up the exports? I think that's the second. Sorry, let's address the first bit first.
That's a really good question. And the short answer is I don't know, because I don't do it that way. I applaud you for making sure you've got a backup of your picture. I think that's really important. But I'm not sure whether even the edits you do to that picture will be backed up in that location. So my preferred way of doing it is I don't do that on import. I do the modifications and the processing to the photo, and then I back it up to my Time Machine drives and my Crash Plan cloud drive and that sort of thing. I'm not saying what you're doing is wrong, but it's not the way I do it. And I would suggest that lightroomqueen.com would be a very good place to ask that question. In her search box, she's probably got an answer.
Great, that's a good advice. I guess what you could do is continue anonymous with what you're doing, and then do a backup, you know, do both, basically do the existing approach, but then you could, if it doesn't store as you suggest, the change you've made, you could then sort of get rid of the first backup. So it means just to keep space. So you have a backup of all your edited files and you get rid of the first one. Does that make sense?
I just find it easier to have one copy of the file that I'm working with, and then I do the backups, which contain the backups and the edits and the catalog.
Yeah. So the second part of the question was, do you export all your photos and back up the exports?
No, goodness no. there's no need for it. The only exports I do is if I'm going to print something or post it on Facebook. You know, if I'm printing it, I want to have it as a TIFF for my lab. They like a TIFF file. If I'm going to put it on Facebook, I like to put it on there with 960 pixels on the long side because it doesn't get messed with by Lightroom's algorithms, and yet it's small enough that it's probably not worthwhile for somebody to steal it. No, I don't export anything unless I'm going to use it for a particular purpose.
Okay, they've added that it's a really useful presentation, so thank you for that. Another anonymous person has said, can you delete old backups of the catalogue and just keep the most recent? I think you actually demonstrated that, didn't you?
Let me show you how I do that. I've actually set my Finder window up so that I have my backups here. I just dragged that folder over here, and you can see that I only have 4 backups. And so when I do my next backup, I'll go in and I'll select that one and drag it to the trash, because I have seen people who have like 50 backups, and that takes a lot of space. So I like to keep 4 to 6, and I just when the next one comes in here with a more recent date, then I take the oldest one and trash it.
Okay. Good question. Corinne has asked, how do I organize things, catalogs, if I use both desktop and a laptop? She's a Mac user.
Okay, so I have a desktop and a Mac and a laptop too, and I do almost all of my editing on my desktop because I like the big screen when I'm editing photographs. So I keep the photographs on the external 4 terabyte drive. If I want to edit something on my laptop, I have the option to either export something as a TIFF or something like that and work on a separate copy. Or the easier way, if you move back and forth between your desktop and laptop more often, the easier way is to store your catalog and your photos both on the external drive. And then all you have to do is unplug the drive from your desktop and plug it into your laptop and go to work, because that's where your catalog will be. That's the simple way to do it. But your catalog, your responses in Lightroom will be a little bit slower if you have your catalog on the external drive. It's the only drawback.
Right. Laura, she said, I know you explained how you keyword photos within Lightroom, but do you also keyword them where they are stored on the external hard drive?
No.
There we go. Anila says, thank you. This is so helpful. We have another anonymous person. Do you create a folder in Lightroom to match the folder in Pictures before you add the photos?
I'm glad you asked that. No. The way that works is, let's see if I've got a folder that isn't imported. If I hit the import button and I go to my 4 terabyte drive, oh, that's the wrong 4 terabyte drive, photos 4 terabyte. There might be some pictures in here. Photos. I'm so well organized that, oh, here we go. Okay, so these pictures are, I do the newsletter for my camera club, and so these are pictures that were submitted for the newsletter. So I choose this folder, and I'm going to say import, and it should bring them in the folder. So no, I don't make the folder.
Okay.
So there they are, right there.
Great. Heidi says she's really struggled with catalogs and putting photos into them. She gets the playlist analogy, but still not sure how to do it.
Okay, so Heidi, let's go through it one more time for you. I'm going to down here, and this will be a good example for somebody else too. I'm going to go to that 2020. There's the folder that I brought in for SheClicks, and I'm going to remove it from the catalog. And notice it will be, the photos will be removed from the catalog, but the folder and the files will remain on the disk. So that's fine. We're just taking that card out of the library's card catalog.
Yep.
So now, if I go into my Finder and I go to my Photos hard drive, Pictures, 2020, there's the folder that I want to import. Okay, this is where I had made that folder and I dragged these pictures in knowing that I wanted to use them today. And so that's where they sit. So this is like if you put your camera's card in and you drag the files over and you put them in this folder, because that's where you know you want them to live. Okay, so then I go to Lightroom and I click import. And I go to that drive that they were on. I go to my pictures folder. So I'm trying to find the folder that we just made. It's in under 2020. Go down here. There's the She Clicks. Okay. I click that. I say, yep, those are the pictures I'm looking for. And then I check up here. Always check up here. I do not want copy as DNG, copy or remove. I want add. So I make sure that I've got add. I go over here and I make sure that I've got my metadata that I showed you how to set up, my copyright, and then I click import. And the whole folder comes in. I didn't have to make that folder. And the pictures come in with it, and there they are. So Heidi, is that clear to you now?
Give her a few moments to reply. I was just going to say, I don't know if it helps, but say, you know, we were talking before about having two computers. Say you had a desktop and a laptop. You could be using your laptop. You insert the card, you copy all of the files onto an external hard drive. You could then take that external hard drive and connect it to your main computer, your desktop, and then you could add that folder to your Lightroom catalog. You know, it's that kind of flexible a system.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Sally has asked, says her Lightroom is very slow and often not responding. Is this because she has 43,331 files in it as far back, going back as far as 2013?
No, that should not be a problem. The two things that it might be are, number one, if you don't have enough RAM in your computer. So if you go to, if you're on a Mac and you go to the black apple in the upper left and you go to About This Mac, it will tell you how much RAM you have. It says memory. I have 32 gigs of RAM. I wanted a muscular machine when I bought this one. You could get away with 16 quite easily, but if you have 8 or less, that's going to make Lightroom slow. So the number one thing to do is check your RAM and maybe add some more. It's not that terribly expensive. The other possibility is that it may be that your Lightroom catalog hasn't been optimized for a while. So when we looked at catalog settings, or maybe if I just, I'm just going to quit Lightroom. It's going to pop up with this. If this comes up just when you quit Lightroom, make sure you've got test integrity before backing up and optimize catalog before backing up, both checked. This will take longer to do the backup, but it will kind of tidy it up. It's like taking your car to the mechanic and having it tuned up so it doesn't make nasty noises when you're driving down the road. So I keep these on all the time. My catalog is optimized and tested every single time I quit Lightroom.
Okay.
So those two things. I suspect your RAM may be the culprit, but the number of photos, no, that's not an issue. You should be able to have 4 million photos in your Lightroom catalog with no problem.
Okay. Could there also be an issue of where it's stored if it's on an external hard drive, which is getting very full? They tend to get a bit slow.
Good point. And you should always keep 75 to 80% of your hard drive empty, because all programs, but particularly programs as intense as Photoshop and Lightroom, need that space to use, as they call it, scratch space, to do sort of processing in the background. So your hard drive should always be 20 to 25% empty. And if they're not, that could be causing slowdown, and it could also cause you to get corrupted files. So for goodness sake, clean your hard drives out, get rid of the photos you don't need, buy a bigger hard drive, whatever it takes so that you can run with 20 to 25% of your hard drive empty.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, we've got two people asking how you create a collection.
Okay, let's do that. Starting up Lightroom again.
Yep.
And we scroll down to have a lot of collections. Go down here where it says collections, there's a plus sign.
Yep.
Okay, we click the plus sign and it gives us the option to create a collection or a smart collection or a collection set. So let's start with a collection. We're going to create a collection for Her Majesty the Queen. All the things we're going to send her. Okay. And we're going to, I usually use this when I'm setting up a collection from scratch. I set it as the target collection because what that means is that anything that I hit the B key will end up in that collection. I'll just show you how that works. So we create the collection and should be, did I call it? There she is, Her Majesty. And it's got a plus sign beside it. That tells me that if I choose a photo and hit the plus, hit the B key, it will go in there. So let's do that. Let's give her this one. I'll hit B and it says add to target collection Her Majesty. And now when we look over here, we see that there's one photo in there. If I want to add these 3 photos, I can shift click them and hit the B key, B as in Bob. And now those 3 have been added to Her Majesty's collection. Okay. If you want to make a smart collection, it's similar. You click on plus, you say create a smart collection. And we're going to call this one dogs because Her Majesty likes dogs. We're going to send her some dogs pictures. Unfortunately, I have no corgis in my collection, so she'll be very disappointed. But a smart collection, we're going to say match these rules. So we're going to say match the keyword, which is under other metadata, contains dog, and create. And now there's our dogs list, and look at that. We got 120 pictures of dogs to send to the Queen. Now, really, I should have only rated my number 5 stars. Say I look at those and I say, well, that's too many to send her. So I can double click the Smart Collection icon. I can go in and add another criteria and say, well, it is for the Queen after all. So let's add a criteria and we'll give it a rating of at least 4 stars is greater than or equal to 4 stars and hit save. It's the same collection, but it's only got 2 pictures in it now. And one of them's a flower. What's up with that? Well, what's up with that is a dogwood flower.
Right.
So that's sort of a gotcha to watch out for.
Yeah.
And then I would go and change, I hold down control or right click this and I would rename that collection and call it dogs 4 stars, 4 stars plus. So you can see that once you start doing this, it becomes really quite easy to make very specific collections of things for different uses.
Excellent, thank you for that. Laura says she now has her catalogue and her photos on an external hard drive and Lightroom is slow. Is it easy to move it back to the Mac?
Yes. I think, and I would suggest you check this on lightroomqueen.com because that was an unanticipated question. Good for you, you got me. I think it's as simple as copying that catalog from the external drive onto your internal drive. You don't have to copy the images, just the Lightroom catalog. And it's a Lightroom catalog folder, all the stuff that's in that Lightroom catalog folder. Just copy it onto your internal drive and it should operate as normal when you start it up there. If you wanted to copy the pictures, then you just drag them here. on this side of the screen.
Okay, right. Still got quite a lot of questions to get through. So could you tell us how to make the first pick of the best photos of a shoot? So I think that's basically, you know, using the ratings and the labels.
So what you're saying is to put them in order of quality?
I guess, well, I think it's just how to go through, do the first cull.
Yeah, I would press the star number. So when I do my culling, and everybody does it differently, I go through and I give everything I kind of like a star, just one. And anything that's rubbish, complete rubbish, I hit X, because that's going to get thrown out later. And then I'll go through all the ones and I'll say, well, actually this one's more of a 2, and so forth. And I'll do that. And then down here, you can set how they sort and how appear. Right now, these are by capture time, but I could change them to go by rating, and it would change the order and put the best ones at the top. If I want the worst ones at the top, I just hit this button, which reverses the order. Worst ones at top, best ones at bottom.
That's my approach too, as well. I go through doing 1 stars. I go through doing 1 star, and then I get to one. I think, oh yeah, like you say, that's a 2, and then I sort of escalate from there. Okay, thank you. Oh, and Ella says, thank you very much. Very useful. Megan says, once you've finished processing, do you save a JPEG so you have a final version of the picture without being dependent on Lightroom's XMP file?
Not unless I'm going to print it or send it to somebody. No, like these are some of my favorite photos, and this is it. This is what I've got. Only when I go to print it would I export, because they're safe. You know, I've got the photo, I've got the XMP file, I've got 3 backups of the photo and the XMP file. There's no need to take up more space by creating a JPEG or a TIFF or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Wendy's gone slightly off topic, but she's having problems syncing images that have been edited in Nik Silver Effects Pro 2 between Lightroom Classic and, sorry, on her MacBook Pro and on Lightroom CC on her iPhone. Any ideas why and how to fix it?
I don't use Lightroom CC on my iPhone, so no, I can't really answer that one. But check lightroomqueen.com. She might have an answer.
Yep. Okay. Good idea. Liz says this is very useful. Thank you. Lynn, if you lose or stop using Lightroom, do you lose all the amendments you've done to images in your collections?
Yeah. And this is one of my pet peeves about Lightroom. I really didn't want to sign up for the subscription through Adobe. I was hoping to find another way. And part of that was because if I decided to stop my subscription to Lightroom, what I would have to do is go through my 54,000 photographs and export them all so that those changes would be baked in. And that seemed like a huge amount of work. But I've used Lightroom enough now, and I've started using Photoshop enough now to realize that I'm just going to bite the bullet and be part of their system. I don't like their business model, but it just seems like the least hassle. There are other options out there. On1 has a good software program that has some digital asset management built into it so you can organize. Luminar is quite good, especially if you're a landscape photographer, and they have some organization built in as well. So you don't have to use Lightroom, but if you're a serious photographer who's selling prints in a gallery and all that, then it's, I guess, a relatively small price to pay to have it there for every month. And if I did decide that I was going to ditch it, then I would simply export all of my best work as TIFFs or RAW files or something.
Okay, thank you. Can you have a copy of the catalogue on a hard drive?
Yes.
Okay, let's leave it at that. Anonymous, if you're wanting to cull your backups, do you search on zip to find them?
No, I search on .lrcat.
It would still find them. Yeah. Yes, because otherwise it would find all of your zip files, anything
That's
that ever been zipped. So,
That's right.
okay. Diane says, thank you very much. She's learned a lot. Heidi is saying, yes, thank you. So I think you've answered her question. That was great.
Good.
Sue said, can you explain the use of previews, please?
I think I know what you're driving at there. When you bring photos into Lightroom, it doesn't actually bring the whole raw file into Lightroom. What you're seeing is a smaller version that you can then work on. And you may be referring to, there's an option to create smart previews, I think they call it. Pardon me, and that brings in the full resolution one, and they take a lot of space. So the preview is just what you see here. So what I'm seeing with this Comet Neowise shot is the preview. When I double click it, it takes a second and it shows me the actual workable file. And then I can make my adjustments on this. Some people like to make smart previews because then they can work on the photo even if the drive containing it isn't attached to the computer. So if I had my catalog on my iMac and my photos on my external drive, and my external drive was not attached, if I had smart previews, I could still do the editing. But to me, the trade-off isn't worth it. I just keep my drive with the images attached, and then I don't have to take all that extra space in the catalog for smart previews. It adds up a lot.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Valerie says she has a Mac and she's avoided upgrading from Mojave to Catalina because she's read reviews saying that Lightroom Classic does not work well with Catalina. Have you found this to be the case?
Well, Valerie, I have avoided updating to Catalina because I'm not sure about Lightroom. Lightroom might be fine, but I use the old free version of Nik software, the Nik Silver Effects Pro and those ones, and they do not work with Catalina. Catalina only works with, I think it's 32-bit programs. Yeah. And so I've avoided Catalina.
Okay. You know what? It will be worth upgrading because the new versions are very, very good. But I'll leave that with you.
Yeah, they're good, but they're not free.
No, they're not free, but they're not that expensive for what is it? Is it 8 packages now? I've imported Marilyn says she's imported her photos to Lightroom, but instead of folders, she's used catalogs to find her photos. How does she get everything into folders? So you kind of covered this, but maybe you could just show Marilyn again.
The question isn't making sense to me. Instead of using folders, she's using catalogs?
Yeah, that's what she said.
Can you clarify that, please, Marilyn?
Okay, sorry, yeah.
Because when photos come in, they go into folders in your catalog. Are you meaning collections, maybe?
Or maybe. Right, so Liz says, to the anonymous user, with the drive that failed, I think when you've lost a drive/folder, there is a find missing folder in the contextual menu option that appears, and you can move the drive to point at the new external drive. So if you have the same folder structure on both, it might figure it out for you. Liz is a Lightroom 4.1 user. I think Judy may not have seen this because she's doing things right. And I know this for reasons that are too painful to recall. Okay, so sounds like Liz has learned that from bitter experience.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Martina says, so when you put a photo in a collection, it will be gone from the folder? Question.
No. When you put a picture in a collection, let's take this horn picture and drag it into my backdrops for screen collection. Okay. Oh, that's a collection set. Sorry, that's not going to work. We'll drag it into the blue one. Now, if we go to the blue, there's the horn. But when we go back to the horns, the horn is still there. That's because a collection doesn't actually contain the picture, I think of it this way. It might be a little cheesy, but think of it this way. The collection has a whole bunch of little elves in it. And the this elf says, go get that horn picture, I need it. And this elf says, go get that water picture, I need it. So that they don't actually live in there. You're not duplicating the file. You're just putting a pointer to that file in the collection so that you can get at those pictures when you want to. Okay. And similarly, I'm going to delete this horn because it does not belong in my blue backgrounds. I hit delete and it's gone from there, but it's still, if we go back to the horns, it's still there in the horns. So removing something from a collection doesn't remove it from the folder, but removing it from the folder does remove it from the collection because the folder is where it lives.
Okay, so it's all done by elves, which is good to know.
All done by elves.
Marilyn says she does mean collections. So she's imported her photos into collections, not folders.
They'll still be in folders, Marina. They will be in your collections, but if you look around in your file structure, you will find that there are still folders because that's how Lightroom works. Yeah. It works on folders. It might be hidden like this. See what I've done? I clicked my hard drive, and so they're hidden. But if you click the hard drive again, it's like, oh, there's the folders.
Okay. I'm just wondering, I guess there's another option if she's imported them into one folder, not into, like, anyway. Yes, I see exactly what it could well be what you're saying. You need to expand the folders. Joanne says, can you have just one target collection?
Yes, at any given time, you can only have one collection that is your target. So right now, Her Majesty's one is, and it shows, oh no, the dog's one is, it shows with the plus sign. So that's how you know which one is the target collection. And the target collection just means that any image that you have selected and you hit B for Bob, that will go into the target collection. It's just a quicker way than dragging them.
Yeah, great. Carol says she currently has multiple catalogs for different subjects. For instance, I have one wedding portrait studio work, one for weddings, portrait studio work, another for personal stuff, another for music photos. Would it be better to amalgamate them, all the catalogs, and sort by setting up collections? She actually has two for music because the first one got so large.
Okay, my suggestion would be I would combine the two music ones because that's logical. It makes sense and you would know where to look for the music ones. But it's a matter of personal preference. It sounds like you're very highly organized. It sounds like you have very distinct kinds of photography you do with your studio and weddings. Some people do prefer to keep it that way. So I wouldn't try to influence you to change that. But if you did want to have everything all together, you could. In your shoes, if I was doing the kind of work you're doing, I might very well do it the way that you are.
Right. That's good to know. Laura says she's loved the webinar, extremely useful. Many thanks.
Good.
Sorry, Sue has asked, is there any way of identifying duplicates in Lightroom? She seems to have a lot by accident.
That happens, yes. And it's a long, slow process, but you could do it by going up to the metadata, and you could choose, I'm looking for a date. You could go to seeing date there, but you could go to location, and you could get all of your pictures from a particular location up. You can go to a particular camera and use these to try to find similarities. So, or even keywords. If you know that you've got duplicates of birthday cake pictures, you could just look for all of the even just the text of birthday cake or birthday, and find them all, and then you can see what you've got. Although this is looking for the EM1 camera as well, so I'm going to make that none, and I'm going to make this one none, and just look for birthday. under text. Text, sorry, folks.
It's okay.
I guess I don't have birthday photos keyword. Let's try
Kate,
dog. No,
go for the dog. It's a good bet.
Oh, but maybe I'm not on my all. No, I'm not on my all pictures. Need to be on my all pictures. So there's a gotcha to watch out for. So if we go to text and we look for dog, there's all my dog pictures. And I can see, well, those are two pretty similar ones. Maybe I should make a choice and get rid of the other one.
Yeah. Okay, great. So that's the answer, Sue. Carol says thank you. So you obviously answered her question well. Thank you very much for that. Right, so some more people saying thank you very much. Really enjoyed it. Patricia says, oh, really easy to follow presentation. Repetition of certain points really drove them home. Many thanks for your patience and lightheartedness. That's nice.
Thank you.
Right, just get some more questions now. So Martina says, Judy, you said you almost never export images. If you need to for web clients, etc., would you export them and save them to the hard drive? By the way, thank you for this. Thank you for the elves.
I missed one word in what you said, and I think it's key, Angela. If you were going to export them for what?
For web use or clients, or you know, or make a print or whatever, would you export them and save them to a hard drive?
Yeah, I would. I normally export them to a file folder on my desktop. And then after I've sent that image to my printer and I know that he's got it and he's printing it for me, then I delete it from the desktop because it becomes a copy and I don't want copies. I don't want duplicates. If I'm going to put it on Facebook, I export it from Lightroom to my desktop, then I put it on Facebook, and then I delete it from my desktop.
Okay, that makes sense. So the last question. Kate says she definitely needs to know how to merge catalogs, please. She has one on Lightroom CC on her PC and one on Lightroom desktop version on her laptop. Once she's home full time, she'd like them to be merged onto the PC. So there's an extra step in there because they're actually on different machines.
Right. But if you move the catalog from one machine onto the other, so they're both on the same machine, it's pretty straightforward to go up here to library, and there's a merge libraries. Where is it?
You've got the She Clicks thing selected. I don't know if that's going to have an impact.
Yeah, it shouldn't.
Okay.
There is a merge libraries command, and it may not show until you've actually got two libraries open.
Oh, right.
But again, for a quick question like that, that's very specific, lightroomqueen.com will probably give you an answer very, very quickly.
Great.
It's
okay, so
it can be time consuming, but it's not hard.
Okay. Thank you. So that's great. Thank you very much. There's lots of people just adding questions, but actually they're just saying thank you very much. It's been really, really clear, and they've enjoyed learning from you. So thank you so much, Judy, for taking the time to put all this together and present it, and also, you know, being able to understand the questions, because it's, you know, it's really hard when someone reads you a question, you know, about something you were talking about 10 minutes ago and try to piece it together and be able to answer. So it's really useful. Thank you.
My pleasure. I'll just leave this up here, and if you want to follow my photography, it's jhhphoto.com.
Thank you very much. And it seems like some really useful resources, but I think everyone's learned a lot tonight. So that's been great.
If people have other questions, they can certainly tag me on the Facebook She Clicks page, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Great, that's very kind of you. Thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. I was going to say have a good evening, but you're only just getting to lunchtime, aren't you?
It's lunchtime. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.